Hi everyone, and welcome to a LIS536 professional development session on the maker cycle and skill acquisition in public library makerspaces for teens or YA. My name is Tova Harris. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a second year UB student, and I actually began my career in libraries within makerspaces a few years ago. It's been an awesome adventure to get to be so creative within the communal space of libraries, and interestingly enough, I've only really worked with adult patrons in designated public library makerspaces. So this research process has been a really helpful way to better understand YA populations and the literature review, or really lack thereof, of information behaviors and information practices of teens and makerspaces, which argues for the importance of further examinations on learning for YA populations. Okay, so today's presentation goes through the following topics. Firstly, what is a makerspace? Then how do YA exist in public library makerspaces? Next is a series of slides on cognitive processes via the maker cycle, design thinking, and self-directed learning, or SDL. We move on to an imagined 8-step makerspace learning objectives model, and then 2 scenarios of its use in a YA makerspace setting. So what is a makerspace? A makerspace, most simply described, is a permanent and interactive library of things, a place where patrons come to use equipment, to craft, to make, or to design, simply for the experience of crafting, making, or designing, which research shows can boost self-esteem, increase pro-social tendencies, and connect a patron with the enlightening process of inductive reasoning and self-inquiry. Since makerspaces have come into libraries in the early 2000s, they have absolutely transformed the potential of library programming and the ways that library staff can connect and advocate for their communities. Young adult populations in public library makerspaces. The maker and thus makerspace library movement employs a do-it-yourself orientation towards a range of disciplines and practices, including the general category of crafting, 3D design, 3D printing, laser cutting, and even coding. Yet, even though makerspaces have become a regular part of the library landscape, little research has been done on teens within them, how teens look for info on making, or even why or how they go about that process. If we further look at information-seeking working definitions, we find a number of behaviors that are very much relevant to a makerspace setting, such as imagining or using emergent or creative ideas, learning or obtaining formal instructional sources to understand, tinkering or solving problems through trial and error, and asking or consulting other people. Such processes mentioned we will certainly return back to in the form of learning objectives. The maker cycle in design thinking, as well as self-directed learning, or SDL. Dale Doherty, founder of the Make magazine, and one could say a founding father of the maker movement in the US, brought the DIY process into mainstream culture, and library makerspaces owe their existence to his creativity and ingenuity of the movement as a whole. However, the origins of a cycle of creation originates from the field of engineering, whereby it is known as the engineering design process, which creates a grounding structure for all formal making cycles. This graphic is currently used with kids and teens in a Museum of Science initiative, the Youth Engineering Solutions. Now, let's bring you into another foundational concept, that of design thinking. Design science and design science research, or DSR, involves a systematic approach to design, including identifying problems, developing solutions or artifacts, and evaluating their overall effectiveness. The nature of design science, and thus design thinking, is to establish a human-centered approach to problem solving, and one that then hopefully involves empathy, subjectivity, and even humanity. Some potential drawbacks of design thinking are potential for detachment from outcome and/or general detachment patterns from the process and cycles themselves. As you can see on this table, the design thinking model is also cyclical in nature, involving multi-layered processes within each stage and each step of the creation process. What is unique about this cycle is its introduction of a thinking about thinking, or a metacognitive lens, particularly labeling awareness and empathizing as equally significant components of design thinking. And lastly, what is self-directed learning, or SDL? To me, the easiest way of understanding self-directed learning is a choose-your-own-adventure model whereby a person interacting with their respective world decides to do or solve something to the point of creation. It is an amazing model for understanding a person's own agency in the trajectory of invention, and also very relevant to the makerspace experience. While self-directed inquiry might be important for adults, it is an essential component of a child in their adolescent years, perhaps as important as the metacognitive visual tools of thinking frames we've already learned and discussed early on in this semester. AVSEC's 2021 study mentions how self-directed learning can be developed during formal education, but seems to flounder in open and flexible learning environments. Therefore, using SDL as a tool in working with teens on assisting in their choose their own adventure experience within a makerspace might prove incredibly supportive by definition. Here are some tables that further explain the cycle of self-directed learning and its processes. The one drawback of this model in Makerspaces is Makerspace library staff's potential extra involvement with each teen patron during their self-directed journey, since so much of it within this model is in their own hands. And now, 8 Makerspace learning objectives model. So I know we've gone over a number of cognitive frameworks of and on thinking processes, and with Katre's 2020 article on self-directed learning within crafts entrepreneurship, I now offer an 8-step adaptation of the study's learning cycle. It begins with a Y18's initial desire to create, which is prompted by library makerspace staff to be supported and encouraged via self-directed searching, which is somewhat less predictable a step since no formalized makerspace skill-building online platforms exist on behalf of kids and teens. However, a YA patron can search online via YouTube and other sources and check in with makerspace staff as they learn. With Makerspace staff's approval, the YA patron can go about making their idea, which most likely and is assumed to mean continuing to check in with Makerspace staff as they make. The 5th step, sharing, is purposely vague since it involves a YA patron showing others their work. This could be via social networks, in person via staff, or with peers in the Makerspace. The 6th step, listening, is a feedback stage whereby Makerspace staff can formally offer resources. And the 7th step is learning, since it's an important distinction between listening and learning, in that listening is really a reflection of what is being learned. To finally, adaptation on behalf of a YA patron to their own creative process. Here are some YA Makerspace learning objectives. Scenario 1. Joseph is a 16-year-old teen at a suburban public library called the Prickly Pear Public Library. Joseph regularly attends the Makerspace 3D design programming series using a software called Tinkercad and already has a number of 3D designs he's actively worked on via prompted library programming. Joseph would like to begin designing from start to finish Dungeons and Dragons miniatures and is very excited about using the designs he makes in his own weekly campaigns with his friends. So, with this scenario, how could the YA Makerspace Learning Objectives model aid in this process? Well, Joseph's interest seems to already establish step 1's desire to create, which leads to Makerspace staff asking Joseph to begin researching 3D designing as it relates to D&D modeling, which will hopefully lead to Joseph's checking in on what he finds, him making some 3D designs and prints, Joseph sharing these prints with friends and Makerspace staff, hearing from Makerspace staff on design and print assessments, learning from that feedback and either editing and or reprinting his 3D Dungeons and Dragon designs. Understandably, this scenario depicts a very tame version of a teen accepting and abiding to and with the formalized process of creating. But the scenario series serves as a way to understand the dynamics of a cycle, not its general efficacy necessarily. And now a YA Makerspace Learning Objective Scenario number 2. Shira is a 14-year-old teen at a suburban public library, also called the Prickly Pear Public Library. When Shira attends YA Makerspace programming, she often doesn't finish her projects or drifts away mentally when encountering an obstacle in her making. Prickly Pear Library Makerspace staff begin to notice this trend and decide to come up with something to better aid Shira in her making process when she shuts down. Based on the YA Makerspace Learning Objective model, how could staff help Shira to engage more with the Makerspace and its various programs and processes? So the scenario described here may resonate with many of you who work in teens or children's departments and notice a patron regularly checking out mid-program. To this end, the option of using the YA Makerspace Learning Objectives model may come in handy. Firstly, Shira may be checking out due to her own lack of interest in a Makerspace program, or for mental health issues or reasons, or even not feeling challenged by the program at hand. To combat any of these scenarios, a Choose Your Own Adventure quest of this SDL model may offer Shira just the nudge she needs to feel encouraged to go through the process of discovery. Makerspace staff could even present her with a few options on things they've seen her enjoy previously, so she feels seen in the beginning of this SDL journey. As with all models of thought, this Makerspace Learning Objective model is a tool, not a rule, and so let it offer, if anything, at least an introduction and a conversation on pedagogical and design thinking frameworks for you as library Makerspace staff to consider as you continue to pave roads in territories unknown. Thank you for taking the time to hear about public library makerspaces and the love and care so many of us put into them. See you soon.